Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jan Leary, and I wanted to welcome you to the Truth Zone. And today we have Jessica Makowitz. She's actually my niece. My brother, Bob Winslow, had testified a few weeks ago, and this is his wonderful one and only daughter that we all love so dearly. So, Jessica, I wanted to ask you, hon, how long has it been since you've given your life to Christ? And what were the key things in your life that made you really want to follow him?
I've been serving God for 19 years, and I think the things that really brought me to a decision with Christ was I always knew him in my mind. I always knew he was there, even when I was really young. I remember walking down the street and being very aware of God. His presence was there in my life, even very young, but I didn't know him in my heart, and there's a huge difference. One is a religion and one is a relationship. And what happened was I was at a church camp, and I heard a message about the difference between religion and relationship, and how just knowing God and knowing what was right to do in life was not going to bring you to heaven. It was a decision to lay down your life for God and to surrender to him and to make him Lord of your life was the only way you could make heaven your home. And I just remember surrendering to God and saying, that's what I want. I want you to have my life. I want you to take whatever you want in my life. And that's when it all started.
Jessica, you became like a very bold witness for Christ. And sometimes actually being a bold witness, people just don't welcome you like the welcome wagon. And, you were going to school at the time. I remember some of your stories. And why don't you share how, God helped you really to make a stand for him, but what the opposition was actually all about at that time?
When you know the truth, it doesn't make it easy to always say it. A lot of times, sometimes you may feel alone in telling people, and sometimes it's downright hard, but I always knew in my heart, it didn't matter what happened to me. I knew it in my heart that people needed to know. If this was their last day in the world, I was responsible by knowing them that they needed to know that God was real and that he was going to ask them what they did of their life and if they knew him in order to make heaven their home. And I remember one time, it was very clear, it was after I was on a bus ride and I was getting mocked the whole bus ride and stuff, and these group of girls came up, they held their saliva in their mouth and they all at once spit on me and got off the bus. And I remember crumbling inside. I just didn't understand why someone could do anything that disgraceful. And I just remember feeling like God telling me that, obviously I felt him so close at that time. He was so near to me. It was like he was holding his arms around me. And he did tell me that it wasn't because of me. It was because of him. And it's a lot of times because people are scared. They don't really know what you're saying, and so they get kind of nervous about maybe surrendering their life. They don't really know what that entails, so they get nervous, and they don't want to be nervous in front of anybody. Maybe from the background they had, maybe always being told they were wrong, whatever. So they, it's not because of you or because of what I was, a witness, that they did all of that. It was because that they were scared. They were girls that they maybe felt that I was saying the truth to them, but they were scared and didn't want to look like they needed help. So.
Wow, and that is really remarkable, Jessica, which actually points to the fact that being a Christian, a lot of people will not accept it. Truth or not, they will not accept it. And so there's a lot of opposition as Christians that you actually, through your life, go through. But the benefits are just untold. So tell us, Jess, you obviously kept pressing through in your life. You never gave up. You held on. And what is the blessing of holding on and going for Christ?
Countless blessings is what I can say for merely just holding on to a God that has rescued you from untold things. I know that God saved me from so many things, from so many heartaches. One in particular, I know that God rescued me from a rape that what was going to happen when I was just turning 12. God completely snatched me away from that incident. He did not allow that to happen to me, and it was apparent that it was going to happen no matter what. And that, on top of just knowing that, once I was married, that I was a virgin, he was a virgin. There was untold blessing in that, of God saving both of us. And there's this amazing blessing of God that every day follows because of that. That just is not something that people can even imagine unless they're in it.
So Jessica, tell us, how many children do you have?
I have 2 kids, and I'm going to have 3. And there's a blessing knowing that even when I was younger, how God's presence was so real to me. I know that with the children I'm raising, God can definitely make himself real to them. And even though the world is crazy all around them, that there's a confidence that he can do that, and he can make himself real to them and help them make right decisions one day. So it's good.
So Jessica, in your just final little comments here, what would you have to say to encourage people out there and truly how they can find Christ in their life?
I would say a lot of times life is really fast right now, and we get so busy doing what we have to do to make a living and everything else, to not really find the time to stop and evaluate how our life is going and what direction it's heading. And I would challenge someone, it doesn't matter if you have done everything right your whole life and you feel like you've got your life right where you need it to be, or if you've done everything wrong and you're like, wow, I'm such a screw up. If you really took the time to say, where is my life heading right now? What is the direction? And to know, am I going to make heaven my home? Because if the Bible says you have to know in your heart that Jesus is real and confess with your mouth, that means to proclaim that Jesus is my Lord. If you haven't done that, then you're not making heaven your home, no matter how good you've been or how bad you've been. You desperately need to get to the point where you lay down your life. That means all your ideas, all your dreams, everything, and grab a hold of God. Because a lot of times, I remember with me, there was different challenges in my life where I had to believe either God knows best for my life, and I believe that, or I know best for my life. And the one that created mankind, created me in my mother's womb, knows best. And I believe that, even when things were difficult to understand. And to claim his ownership over that. I claim your ownership, God. And when you do that, you're surrendering your will. And no matter what happens, if you died right now, you'd make heaven your home. And that is a confidence that God's word has proclaimed that you can hold in your heart. And there's a joy that really will spring into your life like you've never felt before. I remember when I got saved, it was like a joy, like a fountain was springing all over me. And I just knew he was so real. No one could tell me he wasn't. He just immediately brought change and satisfaction in my life. And I really hope you do the same.
Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your testimony with us today. And all you people out there, the comments that she made, really look into it, because if you know Jesus Christ, then really you've got everything that you ever need. Now for our next person to just tell you, his testimony about Christ is Stanley Miranda. And Stanley's actually had, an amazing conversion with Christ. Stanley, it hasn't really been that long, but Tell us about the circumstances that were happening in your life and what really made you turn to Christ at that time.
Well, Jan, coming to Jesus, or Jesus finding me, I should say, has been the greatest experience of my life. There's nothing that can replace it. At the time when the Lord found me, my life was really broken. I was completely empty in my heart. Even the outside veneers were shattered from a lifestyle that I lived. And I was in a really bad spot. What changed me, or I should say drew me, was my friend Josh Shapiro, who's now out pastoring, but his life, because I knew him through the industry of cocaine business that I used to be in. He used to work for me, and I saw his life over a 4-year period, a very short period, turn, and there was no denying what had happened in his life. And he would come and visit me often in the hospital, tell me about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. And I saw all that God did in his life. It wasn't like before when I'd be in a prison cell, I'd open the Bible and read it. It was much more than that. That didn't do anything for me. When I saw Josh's life change, that is what drew me to come to the church.
That is so awesome, Stanley. And Josh Shapiro is an unbelievable witness for Christ. And he is right now pastoring in Florida. And Stanley, you're like amazing, like the testimony when you listen to, some of the events that happened. I mean, really, you were like near death. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, some of those events that took place growing up, my parents both worked long hours. My dad's a blue-collar guy, stonemason. My mom was putting herself through school. Ended up in the bank working for a local bank here. And at a young age, I had lots of unsupervised time and found myself in mischief very quickly. Very destructive lifestyle. When I got old enough to move, which is just around almost 17, I left home, and my life began to rapidly, I just got in a lot of trouble. Arrests with the police, many run-ins. I was selling and trafficking drugs. That lifestyle eventually led many years, just went by very quickly. I started to use cocaine and heroin, smoking crack cocaine. Eventually, in the end, around 2006, I had about a 7-year run prior to 2006 of shooting heroin, smoking crack, and I ended up overdosing one night. It was not intentional. I was out partying, forgot how much I had consumed liquor, and I ended up in a massive cocaine, heroin overdose. It's called a speedball, and my heart began to palpitate. I blacked out. I don't know much about what happened at the scene at my parents' home. I had managed to get from a local bar room to that house, to my parents' house, and this all unfolded on their lawn. Well, I woke up sometime after at Leahy Clinic in Boston. I was Velcroed to the bed with a ventilator, and I had people standing around me, did not know what happened. And what happened was the lifestyle of sin that I led gave out its payment, and there is a wage for sin. And I thank God that by his grace, it wasn't death. Very hard struggle. Lost all mobility in my body. Was on kidney dialysis. And I saw Josh labor intently. He would tell me stories about the local church praying for me, continually encouraging me. And he was a light. He just would light up my life when he would come to visit me, even greater than my own presence and my family members. There was something different about when he came to visit me. He would always tell me about Jesus. And that was the first glimpse, I should say, or the first hope of light that my life could turn around, because being 36 years old with no mobility, options looked like they were going to be on dialysis. I was in a coma for quite some time. I was in rough shape. I really didn't want to go on any further. I thank God today for Josh's life and his conversion, which inspired me to reach out for God's hand.
Wow, Stanley, that really is amazing. Showing the power of God working in someone's life in such an amazing, drastic situation. I mean, that's what you would almost call a near-death experience, and yet Jesus Christ came into your life at that time through Josh. And tell us about after all this, Stanley, Josh, did he follow up on you? And if so, how did he actually get you to come out to church and really accept Christ as your Lord and Savior?
Well, that's, I'll say as much as I can in a very short time. There was a long process of that hospitalization and a long process when I was released from the hospital. I went home. It was miracle after miracle while I was in the hospital. I was taken off kidney dialysis, taken off the kidney donor list. Miraculously, my kidneys began to work. A local doctor here who owns his own practice here in Hyannis still says that my case is a miracle case because I had done this to my kidneys 3 times prior. So when I got home, I remember Josh would constantly call me. In fact, there were times where I would get angry when he would come to visit me because he had everything. Though he had no money, he had a tiny little house. He had everything that I wanted, that peace and that joy. And I saw restoration in his life, and I wanted it. But I just didn't think that I was worthy or worth anything, or God hated me because of who I was. I was in a very confined spot in my own heart and mind. And I thank God Josh was able to chisel in all the time. What really inspired me once is he came to my house with this black guy. I didn't know who he was. Josh is white. He always hung out with the brothers, the black guys. And so he shows up one day with this black guy and says his name is Pastor Williams. And they actually came over to move some furniture around the house for me because I was walking on a walker and my wife was not strong enough to move the furniture. And they just laughed with me. They were normal. And I always thought that a preacher or a pastor had to be this guy who was super holy, and they were just regular people. And that it had inspired me to want to actually come out to a church service. Over some time, I decided to come. I was too embarrassed to come in on my walker, but I needed it, and I came out to church. And the power of God, the love in the room, the atmosphere, there was a tangible presence of light on certain individuals' faces, their children. What I saw in that place, I had to have it. I just didn't know how to get it. And there was an altar call, and I raised my hand and I asked Jesus into my life. And at that moment, I believe a true seed was planted, and it took time to cultivate and time for things to grow and decisions to be made on my own behalf and learning. But I thank God for all he's done in my life and continues to do.
Wow, Stanley, that is like so awesome. I can't thank you enough, really, for coming today and really telling the truth. I mean, a lot of times it's really hard to say what you've been involved in, especially if you've been gripped by self-hatred, which is what, a lot of us who have been in those situations have been gripped by. It is such a release to actually be able to say your testimony, because out there are so many people hurting that need to know that no matter how far you have gone or are going, Jesus Christ loves you, cares for you, and is really waiting for you to accept him as Lord and Savior. Thank you, Stanley, so much for your time.
I'd like to leave you with one thought of hope. If you are in that place, regardless of what your circumstances, but if your heart is in a position that it is confined or trapped, whether it just be you're unforgiving, you're bitter, certain dynamics have played out in your life, and you're in a place called loneliness, Jesus Christ is the answer. He is everything that you are looking for. He is a river of flowing water of restoration. And if you would give God a chance, give Jesus Christ a try, he will turn your circumstances around, catapult your life into the joy, the peaceful happiness, and the blessing that you are searching for. I love Jesus Christ. I am grateful and thankful for all that he's doing. That's what I have to say.
And our last and final testimony for today is a woman by the name of Maeve McAuliffe. And Maeve has been a blessing, really, to so many people, to our church. She's really a wonderful girl. And Maeve, I want to ask you, when did it all start with you? What events were happening in your life that actually made you want to turn to Jesus Christ?
There's a lot of testimonies even in the church of people who went to different countries or continents even to find God, or find an answer. But I didn't care enough like try to find Jesus, and I didn't know that that's what I was looking for. Jesus definitely 100% found me in a situation and made himself real to me. And I think that the year before he made himself real to me and found me was definitely the turning point in my life, where I grew up my whole life knowing that there was something missing and that there had to be something more. I knew as a small child that life to me did not make sense. I remember being, 5 years old and thinking, like, what am I doing here and why am I here? And I was born into a family with, parents who didn't necessarily, appreciate or love their children as much as they should have. And I grew up literally with a mother who told me that she hated me and that I was her biggest regret. And I remember thinking, if my own parents can look at me and tell me that they don't want me and that I was a regret and a mistake, then if there is a God, then there's no way that he would want me or he would love me. And I just kind of spent my whole life, instead of searching for the something more that I deep down knew was out there, I spent it just rebelling and being angry, until I came to the point where I was out on my own at a young age when I was still in high school. Through a whole series of events, I just was left, every friend I had was either dead or in jail, and I literally was alone. I had nobody. And there was a point where I literally was so lonely that it was a physical pain, and I just was crying and asking God to end my life. And it was then that he literally, like, supernaturally came to me and showed me where to come to find him and that he was here.
That's incredible, Maeve, really, that you had come to this point in life and yet Jesus Christ came and, he brought salvation to your life. That is so, like, amazing. Tell us, like, what did you do to actually find Christ? You were, at that point, very depressed and, you called out to him. But what actually happened that Jesus Christ came into your life?
Well, I'd come to Victory Chapel for a Halloween play 3 years ago. And at the end of the night, I just kind of went home. I never thought of this place ever again. It didn't really have that much of an impact on me. And it wasn't until January of 2010 that I came back. And that was because I, was in this lonely state that I was in, cried out to God, and the way that, without even knowing him, I knew that it was him that was telling me to come back. And so I come to the church, and after a few stubborn weeks, finally I give my life to Jesus. And the way that I know that it was him was because of everything in my life changing, not just, addictions breaking, but, for me, I was a heavy drinker. I did use drugs. I did, horrible things. But more of what I was delivered from, from what I feel is more emotional things or more, internal things than things that I did. And that is the loneliness, the, feeling, the self-hatred that, I'm not wanted and nobody wants me. And God really, the first few months that I was saved definitely made it so real to me, like a physical feeling that he does love me and that he does want me. And that's definitely how I knew that it was God, was knowing that this was the something that I was looking for, or knew deep down that there was something more, and I knew I had found it.
That's awesome, Maeve. Now, Maeve, what would you tell the audience out there? Because I'm sure that there's people that were like you that were struggling in the same way. How would you encourage them, and what would you say to these people?
That's a good question. I get a lot, from coworkers or from different people, how can I be so young and not drink or do drugs or sleep around or anything like that. And I know that it's because before I was saved, those are all the things that I did do. And it's the things that people look for to fulfill something that they don't have. And, you look to alcohol, you look to sex, drugs, anything to fill what you know is missing. No matter how prideful you are, how stubborn you are, everybody has the same void. And no matter what you try to fill it with, there's nothing. No matter how much fun you might have for a season, it's not in anything but God. And, I think the biggest thing is pride and, laying that down and giving up those things. And that's how you'll see that it is God what you need. And it doesn't matter how young you are or how old you are, that He is the answer no matter what your circumstances.
Well, Maeve, that is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony. And I want to thank everyone out there that's been listening tonight, that you will just really take what everybody said and just realize that really is the way to go for the joy, the peace, and the happiness that you're so looking for. Jesus Christ is really the answer.